want to be respectful of everyone's time. Really appreciate y'all taking the time to be here today. When we got here, the room was very cold, but since so many of you have shown up, it has definitely warmed up. So really appreciate you taking the opportunity to be here. We're going to have a pretty open, important, but informal discussion today. As you know, the title was Senior Housing Stabilization Roundtable. It's something I know myself and my colleagues on council have heard a lot about, but also people in the room and on the panel today have either championed or have raised concerns about the impact that our growth in our community, the growth in the region, it's continuing to have for those seniors that want to be aging in place or aging in the right place, which in our work in age-friendly Columbus, now age-friendly globally in the region, was in their neighborhoods where they have committed and contributed so much. So before we begin, as always, I want to thank everyone for their work, preparation, and participation to get us to today's hearing. First, would like to thank Age Friendly Columbus and Franklin County Director Katie White, Ohio State Representative Herschel Craig, Senior Services Roundtable Vice Chair and former Columbus City Council Member Fran Ryan, Central Ohio Area Aging Information Referral Specialist Patty Callahan, Near East Area Commissioner Layla Boykin, members of my staff Cole Voidach and Kevin McCain, Council's Legislative Research Office Joellen Klein, Matt Erickson, and Michelle Incumpsa, who's interning and provided some of the wonderful research that helped guide us today. Also would like to thank CTV for broadcasting, our council neighborhood engagement team, Aaron Gibbons and Stanley Gates, our wonderful hosts at the Central Community House, and I saw a representative from Congresswoman Beatty's office, and just you all for taking the time to be here. Again, this is an important discussion, and Commissioner Boykin, who I shared, came to one of my community hours, like many of the things that I work on. Every week I hold community hours at a coffee shop, a library. This was at a library, and her and some of the Near East residents shared this concern that they were having, and what can we be doing more on the city side, as a region, on the county, to make sure that we are both sharing resources that are available to keep our seniors able to stay or live in their neighborhood and home, or what more we can do to address the growing concern. And you'll hear some statistics that really are going to set our table today. So the purpose of today's roundtable, twofold: to gather feedback from seniors and those interested in helping our aging populations to stay in their homes, if that is their best option, and to hear from our panel about resources that are available to help just do that. So again, really looking forward to listening and learning and your questions. I think everyone saw on your chairs you have a note card. If there's any questions that come up, I already have two. Feel free to fill them out. There will be an opportunity. We're hopefully going to talk for a good 40-45 minutes, and then an opportunity to have any questions or additional feedback that you may have. So now, the scope of the issue. I think we all recognize Columbus is an increasingly attractive city for both younger residents and just Ohioans in general. We are seeing tremendous growth, and we're really proud of that growth, becoming a destination for businesses, families, entrepreneurs, innovators. But we are recognizing that with the growth we've had and will continue to experience challenges for those that have been aging in place, those are on the margins, those on fixed incomes. And for seniors in particular, that's getting harder and harder. As America continues to grow older and prices continue to go up, being on that fixed income is getting stretched more and more. Since 2008, Social Security benefits have increased by just 11%, but since 2000, the buying power of monthly benefits has fallen at the same time by 34%. The monthly premium for Medicare Part B has risen 195% during that same period, where out-of-pocket prescription costs have increased by 188%. So we also recognize, and we heard it a lot with Age Friendly Columbus, that our age-friendly residents continue to have more financial responsibilities as well. In Columbus, 16,200 grandparents live with their grandchildren under 18 years old, and those grandparents, 39%, have the financial responsibility of those grandchildren. Again, we're also seeing, as we discuss, just how great the prosperity is in Columbus. 2/3 of our residents are doing well, but we know a third aren't. And part of that third is our senior citizens having dramatically impacted by that. Almost 13% of Columbus residents 65 and older are living in poverty, which is up 2.5% from just a year ago. 1 in 10 Columbus senior households have an annual income of less than $10,000. 3 in 10 have less than $20,000. 21% of Columbus residents 60 and over received food stamps in the last year. The average Social Security income in Columbus is $14,725 a year. And housing demand continues to drive up these prices, which has led to significant property tax increases, part of why the stabilization conversation is so important. In 2008, the average sale price of a home in Columbus was $163,732. Last year, it was $214,000. So in a decade, we've seen a 31% increase. At the same time, in 2007, the average property tax bill in Franklin County was $1,790 per $100,000 valuation. And a decade later, the average property tax bill was $2,378. And so that, again, is helping set this table that we recognize, particularly seniors, are struggling to get the assistance to best position them to continue to be able to stay in place. Can't have the conversation was talking about the homestead exemption, last adjusted in 2008, and just a few years ago, the General Assembly introduced means testing to limit the number of seniors that qualified for the reduction. And the county auditor's office increased assessed property values in the last year by 15.5%. And so with the recent assessment, and the auditors adjusted the values of about 20,000 properties, we know we have more than 55,000 senior homeowners, suggesting that we continue to have more households that could potentially be appealing their assessed values, lower their taxes, but doing more with that tighter budget. And so that is all the statistics I'm going to throw at you. I'm sure you're going to hear more, but really wanted to set what helped motivate us today. When the commissioner and some of her constituents came and talked about a proposal to seek stabilization, that's what got us looking into these numbers. And again, looking forward to an informal discussion, but really want to have the opportunity to listen as we look what more the city can be doing, the region can be doing to help address this growing squeezing of our seniors' budgets. So now I'm going to provide an opportunity for the entire panel to both introduce yourself and maybe talk a little about how housing stabilization for seniors, that what you've heard and the challenges that you've heard with rising property taxes, stagnation of their benefits, and I will start with Representative Herschel Craig.
Well, good morning, and let me thank Council President Pro Tem Michael Stenziano for convening this important meeting today. Let me also say welcome to the 26th House District. That's where you all are. But as he was elucidating, as he was going through those numbers, it deeply concerned me, because it's just not hyperbole or some esoteric report. Those of us that live here, and I can walk to my house from here, we know the seniors that live in this community that contribute every day. I'm looking at Miss Grace, and there are many others that serve on area commissions, they serve our civic associations. I see Reverend Brown, many around this room that have reached the age of senior, and I will soon be 70. They are struggling to provide for their families. I was with the kinship group about 3 weeks ago at the State House. And these are grandparents that are now, because of the opiate crisis, that are raising their grandchildren. And so that's why today is so vital, so important, that we talk about these issues in a real way and put faces to those statistics, to understand that families are suffering, and as a consequence, our children are being impacted deleteriously because of what's going on right now. We want the growth to continue to occur in Columbus. I love this community deeply, but we want to make sure that our seniors get all of the resources that they need to have quality of life. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank all of you for coming today. We want to have a robust, deeply thoughtful discussion today around these issues. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
And we'll just keep going down the line. Commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'm Lila Boykin. I'm a Near East Area Commissioner. I've lived on the Near East Side since 1974, and I've been a homeowner since 1981. I am a retired senior and have always been a community activist, which is something that my parents did because of their experiences in Birmingham, Alabama, and moving to Cleveland during the second migration. So we, all 8 of us, were always encouraged to do what we could to help in our community, to help someone when we could. So that's been my life since living here in Columbus. The reason I am here is because Councilman Pro Tem Stenziano listened to me, a gentleman named Richard Harris, Bill Willis, Calvin Hairston, when we talked about some of the bad things, the ugly things that are being said to seniors on the Near East Side. Things like, you don't need to live here, let me buy your house, trying to pressure them. I have received many letters, many phone calls. I don't know how these people got my cell number, but they do, really trying to intimidate us into selling our property. Well, if you're someone like me who has invested most of my adult life living in a house and am now taking on some renovations, that's where I live, that's my community. That community is my family, away from home. The other reason that I'm so concerned is Columbus is a growing city. The mayor has talked about diversity and inclusion, and that means in everything, our way of life, doing business, employment, and education. We don't seem to have a major concern about the plight of seniors living in our communities. You have to ask yourself, if they are driven out due to high taxes, intimidation from realtors and individual buyers, where will they go to get the same kind of life that they have lived for so many years? So we came up with the plan that we need to have resources and support for seniors so that they can age in place. They can decide what they want to do with their homes and when they want to do it. So here is another activist activity that I have committed myself to, because we have to stop this. We need to make sure that our communities are balanced. Communities need the wisdom of seniors, the experience of seniors, so that they too can learn to live in a community and have a family in a community where everybody thrives. But with the increase in taxes, we'll probably get an increase in our Medicare costs, all right? So more money is taken away from us, and it makes it difficult for us to maintain where we live. Last thing I'll say is I was in my doctor's office for my quarterly checkup, and there was a senior lady there who is caring for her sister. And the problem that they're having is that the taxes on her sister's property has increased 3 times, and now they're trying to figure out how can we pay for her out-of-pocket medical care and the taxes to keep the house. So that's how serious this problem is, and we have to, as human beings, make sure that we don't allow other people to improve and live a good life at the expense of others. Thank you.
Next, Katie White.
Good morning. I'm Katie White with Age Friendly Columbus and Franklin County at The Ohio State University College of Social Work, and whose offices are in Blackburn Community Center, just a couple blocks away. So our role here today with Age Friendly is to just share a bit about what we've heard through our research, our focus groups, and our listening sessions. We never call ourselves the experts. We call ourselves the advocates, the activists. It's our job and our duty to make sure that the 90% of older adults in Columbus that say they want to remain in their home have the opportunity and the autonomy to make that choice. That the 88.6% of older adults that want to remain in their neighborhood also have that choice. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Harris, Commissioner Boykin, and Mr. Willis to hear firsthand the challenges going on in the community. And as we continue to operate our offices, we just want to make sure that we continue to listen and to highlight challenges and opportunities and ideas and innovation from the neighborhood level. So I think when we thought about putting together this panel, it's always been our intent that this is one conversation of many. There's actually one going on upstairs right now through the Franklin County Office on Aging. And we need to continue listening and highlighting what the experts are saying, and it's the older adults in the community who are the experts. So thanks for having me here today.
Ms. Ryan?
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and I want to thank our President Pro Tem, Michael Cinziano, for putting this in perspective and for wanting to hear from all of you. For years, I have been listening to not only the plights of many people in the city of Columbus, but as an older adult myself, I've heard and have seen a lot of things that have happened in our community, but I'm so proud now to think of the things that we're doing. It's taken a while for a lot of people to come to the realization that seniors are here and we're on the move, and that we're coming in lots of numbers. And because of that, about 10 years ago, I was called in to see if we could help keep seniors in their homes. And so I accepted that challenge, and it was my third time retiring, but I came back in. And one of the things I said is, well, where do I start? And I didn't really know where to start, especially for beginning of what I call the Senior Services Roundtable. We had no name for a while, no cards, no numbers, anything, but I worked with a wonderful fireman who is Alonzo King, who is now passed, but he kind of brought me into the perspective of, we got to get out on the street, we got to show these people what we really can do. And so I attended a lot. I went to a lot of senior housing. I went to a lot of meetings. I went to a lot of health fairs, and I could tell by what we were doing, even about nine years ago, that things were happening. And I felt it was my job to bring those thoughts and ideas from the community to the political parties, and I did that. And so by recognition of that, we were able to start a lot of new things. We now have 1,000 members of our Senior Services Roundtable. And this is the private and public sector coming together to discuss each month the kind of situations that we find ourselves in with our seniors, whether it's housing, whether it's food, whether it's health care, and whatever comes together in that. And fortunately, the Central Ohio Area Office on Aging is my anchor, and Franklin County Office on Aging is my other partner. And between those two organizations, we have been able to, I think, reach out to most of the people in Franklin County and to the city, and to start building those bridges that we think we need. Housing and transportation and what you see today and what you're going to hear is right absolutely on the cusp. This is what we have to look at, because if we can't live in our own homes, or we can't live and at least help ourselves, we need some enforcement. And that reinforcement is going to come from the knowledge that you see here at the table. Our Age Friendly came about because we were ready for that. We were ready for that. We were ready for our villages, which we have. So we provide for you many, many services, and I left, I hope, enough books on the back. And if you don't have these guys, or you don't know somebody that has them, I really wish you would pick one up and see, because it talks about how to age in place, what we need to survive as seniors, and how we can help you both in your health, in your welfare, and your housing. So I look forward to hearing from you, because I know that the answers are with you, but hopefully we can solve some of the problems with us. So thank you.
And last but certainly not least is Patty Callahan.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Patty Callahan. I'm with the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. I've been with the agency 18 years, and I'm a social worker. For that 18 years, have been on the phones providing information and assistance to callers, resource information about any kind of resource anybody might need. I also direct a program for family caregivers in our 8-county service area, so I'm on the phone talking with caregivers too about the situations that they're dealing with in their caregiving. I can tell you that, the Area Agency on Aging is very much wanting to support the ability for seniors to age in place. And we have always historically looked at home and community-based services to come into the home to help support that. But increasingly, based on the calls we're receiving, it isn't just the need for those home and community-based services that's the issue in terms of keeping a senior in their home. It is the financial needs. And we are definitely hearing from seniors who are really struggling to make ends meet on a daily basis. We are to the point now where we're probably sending, referring seniors to the shelter, between 3 and 4 times a week, just because of the financial situations they're encountering. And some of this is due to, it was primarily due to the rising costs of living and the fact that their income isn't meeting their needs. So we provide every kind of resource. We go down our mental lists. We direct people to community organizations for emergency assistance, and then we also direct people to organizations that can provide some counseling around their financial situation too. So, but definitely the need is very serious, very critical, and it's difficult right now for seniors to make a move quickly because we don't have the senior housing that we need for them to be able to downsize into something more affordable too when that need arises. Because we do have waiting lists in most of our senior housing properties.
So I appreciate, again, you all taking the time. I know we're already getting some questions, and so I'll begin there, and feel free to jump in if you've got an experience or a story to share. The first one, and Commissioner Boykin kind of alluded to this, we're hearing a lot of, and residents that are impacted about code enforcement, the city's code enforcement, getting calls by unknown folks highlighting an issue with that property, and the need for particular seniors needing assistance to be able to comply. If it's a sidewalk issue, if it's a gutter or downspout that's not properly placed. I know the work we've done with Council President Harden to help on some sidewalk replacement costs for seniors that were impacted, but just curious if that's something you're hearing throughout your communities, or if there's suggested resources on top of what the city may be able to be available. But part of the dynamic is the residents are feeling they're getting these calls because people are trying to put pressure on them to move. That if you're not able to pay for that, we're going to continue to aggregate fines, and that would maybe push you out, so then someone can come in, turn over your home, and get you moving out of that neighborhood, which is not the goal of code enforcement, not the goal of the city. So it looks like, Commissioner, you may have some comments.
Well, I just, as of yesterday, had a sidewalk repaired as a result of the roots of the tree pushing it up. Fortunately, I was able to pay for that myself, but there are other people who are not in that position. Yes, there have been many code enforcement violations filed against homeowners throughout, and many of those folks don't have the money to do the repairs. The city has several programs, but I guess the demand is so great on those that they run out of money pretty quickly. So, what do you do about that? How do we get more money? How do we begin to find out who those seniors are who may need repairs, exterior safety repairs, before the code enforcement becomes an issue? And these violations are being written by, quote, their neighbors. Okay, yes, they are. So we're starting to see some division in neighborhoods of new people moving in versus particularly seniors and other people who may be struggling to fix up their homes. So it's a real issue. It's a real issue, and having had that experience myself, I'm like, oh my God, the roots of the tree, the sidewalk was like up this high. If somebody trips and falls, I've got more trouble on my hands, but those are the realities that we address. The one good thing that the city has is the citywide roof repair, but that also fills up very quickly too. So I and my colleagues were looking at how can we possibly raise more money to get to more seniors. So what we're trying to do is to get the list of seniors who live in our particular neighborhoods to find out if they're having problems, especially with exterior repairs that are needed, so we can then get that to the city and begin to negotiate some help for them. Because these people do not want to move. They've spent their whole lives there, and they should not have to move. And we need to begin to figure out a way to share resources in this city to help people who need help. So that's my story.
Let me, if I could.
Represent.
I'm sorry. If I could, thank you very much, Councilmember Stenziano. If I could just add to what Ms. Boykin was saying, it is critical and it is expensive. But when I was on Columbus City Council, we created, I don't know that it still exists, but the Jim Johnson repairs in this particular area where we were looking at supporting seniors staying in their homes. It is a costly endeavor, but if we don't do it, think about the cost. I created a standing committee at council working with our veterans. I think we pushed out close to $1 million so the veterans that lived in this area could stay in their homes. The reality of it is, when I looked at that number, is a real number that one in 10 seniors have less than $10,000 in resources, and only 3 in 10 have resources close to $20,000. For many of us, and my wife, went back, as you know, Fran, and got her MBA and graduated with honors and all of that. We're looking at $200,000 in school loans. So it's not just young people, but those that go back and that are working with that issue and compounding that issue is trying to stay in your home. That's the American dream. And I can tell you that Cliff Tyree and many others who lived in this community, Mrs. Tyree still lives in this community, believe so much in this community and continue to work to vitalize this community, should not have to leave. And so, again, that's why this is so vitally important.
I'd like to comment on the veterans. I've had a lot of calls in about the last year or two of veterans, seniors who are taking care of their grandchildren, but they can't repair the house. They have a leaky roof, et cetera, et cetera. And when I call them back, I ask them if they have been in service. And once I do that, then I give them some phone calls to, some numbers to call, and they do get, they can get some help through the veteran services. So that's a good resource for us, and they've been wonderful. And a lot of times they don't want to ask for, a lot of elder people don't like to ask for help. But in this situation and the situations that your neighbors might be in, it's a good thing to give them some help. So I think that using the veterans would be a tremendous help to some people.
And the other piece, if any resident or neighbor of yours feels they're getting predatory enforcement calls, let council know. We've had some situations, particularly in Milo Grogan. We are able to work with the Code Enforcement Department of Development to address that. It is complaint-based, but we recognize there could be other circumstances going on. And so if they feel it's, again, predatory, that it's constantly the same person or same entity, you don't have to provide who you are if you're making a code enforcement complaint, but we are well aware of the concern and are able to work with the department to have that addressed, so that if there are issues, if there's a health safety risk, we're getting those addressed. But if it's more pressure, we're able to note that and work with the resident appropriately. The next question that was submitted was regarding tax abatements and recognizing that part of the city's incentive package to attract businesses and some housing is tax abatements to developers. And the question is, when can older residents get help through a tax abatement? And that's one that I think Commissioner and some of her colleagues and neighbors brought forward. And we've been looking at other models that other states do. And so not one that's necessarily ready for presentment, but we hear you. That we recognize that they want to see that shared opportunity. We recognize it's a tool in the toolbox to attract business. Same time, it's going to have to be a tool in the toolbox to keep residents in our neighborhoods, again, aging in place. I don't know if anyone on the panel would also like to comment on that.
Well, if you'd like.
You can.
All right, yes. There needs to be a balance in how the city looks at tax abatements. We are not anti-development. We are pro seniors being able to stay in their homes. So if you give a developers a tax abatement, seniors need a tax abatement or a freeze. And so what I'm looking at right now is we have to relook at the increases in property taxes that have been levied on seniors to see if we could roll that back and freeze it where it was prior to the increase. That's where I am. But, you know, things are out of balance, and we don't want to continue to do things that hurt seniors economically, and we end up with a divided community. And that's also a concern of mine. That is also a concern of mine. And Representative Craig, I don't know if you have any comments on that?
Well, you know, and you've already begun to talk about that issue. I know with the state of Ohio, as well as I know President Pro Tem Cinciano is aware of, you know, the rollback and the means testing on property taxes. And that really has had a serious impact on many of our seniors. And so that's something we clearly need to be looking at. It's a serious issue. I've been serving, we created a committee in this General Assembly of the senior and long-term care, and I was just taking notes because that's an area that we need to be looking at. We've looked at retirement issues this last year with PERS and health insurance, but we're going to be looking at every issue that's going to involve our seniors, both in terms of their physical health, their financial stability, and et cetera. So it is a serious issue and one in which we need to be looking at.
One question or a suggestion, we will be emailing out the statistics and following up with anyone when they signed in that provided their email. I appreciate Commissioner Tyree for pointing that out, but we will definitely get you the statistics and additional follow-up. I'm going to look a little bit to my left, and I know Fran provided what I call the catalog, but can you kind of highlight what programs are currently available that might be of assistance to seniors that are concerned about high property tax bills or other challenges they may be having to live in place, or just generally recognition and awareness of resources available?
Like the resources that we have not only in our guidebooks, both in Franklin County and in the Central Ohio, for our Columbus Central Ohio Area Office on Aging, those are familiar. They're more or less things like when you need to have more housing, or you need to have more help, or you need to fix up your house. There are some good vital information in here. But I think as far as the tax and all of I think this is the beginning of discussions. I think we're riding now on the cusp of talking about how do we go into how the neighborhoods come together. I was recently at the mayor's conference with Linden and seeing where we're going to go with Linden. And in all of those discussions, yesterday afternoon and the night before, have been how do we keep our seniors in place? How do we help our youth? How do we work with our churches? And all of this now is going to be a conversation, which before it was always piecemeal. Now I think we're finally together, we're finally getting the cooperation from the private and the public sector. And I think a lot of our issues will be settled when we be able to go into the neighborhoods. And I think from my vision of what I see coming would be the vision of the city and the private sector and the public sector working together to look at what we're doing in housing, keeping seniors in their homes, and fixing up their homes, and certainly speaking to the issues that Leila was talking about, sidewalks, repairs. All of this is part of what we call smart cities. You know, a lot of times you think of smart cities as being just downtown. But smart cities really has got to be affecting all of us in the communities, in our neighborhoods. And I see an aggression, a wonderful set of plans dealing with transportation, dealing with fixing up our houses and staying in place and living where we want to live. You know, not everybody, they say, living in your own home. Well, a lot of us maybe are renting now or going into smaller homes. Maybe we're doing the new sharing things that some other cities are talking about. So all of this is living happily and living with quality of life. And that's kind of what we're proposing, I think, with all of this neighborhood activity that we're doing. So I think that will help. And I think that'll come, the housing, what's requiring, and the new housing that's requiring for keeping seniors and what we're doing, I think is all going to be part of the neighborhood process.
Well, keep looking down, Patty. I don't know if there's additional resources you might want to highlight.
Well, in terms of actual concrete resources, of course, the primary one is the homestead exemption, and as we heard, that they began to means test that again. And for a lot of the folks that are calling us, you know, they're often very far behind on their taxes. And so there is a little property tax assistance program that sits with the Franklin County Office on Aging, but this is not a lot of funding, and it's certainly not able to address the situations that we are hearing people are in where they have been, you know, they're significantly behind on property tax. So the most we can do beyond that is just to recommend that if it makes it a little easier to budget, try to get on a payment plan for property tax. And then we also kind of go down our mental checklist on any other kind of financial assistance they might need. You know, are they plugged into utility assistance programs? Are they plugged into public benefits? Even, you know, we go so far as food pantries. You know, make sure that a senior, if they're eligible for the food boxes, that they're connected with those. We know a lot of seniors are eligible for food stamps or a SNAP, and they're not necessarily applying for that. So we try to get them connected with everything we can to kind of stabilize things, but the reality is that sometimes this just isn't enough. And we know that. And there are not a lot of good answers beyond some of those public programs. So that's what we have to fall back on.
One comment or question is seniors do not want to move out of their homes to quote unquote senior living because of their animals. What have been the experiences, and I know we've heard a little bit about that shift for Fran or Katie with Age Friendly. Do you recommend or experiences when you've had seniors with those situations?
Absolutely. In fact, we have a whole, when we first started out finding out how we could help seniors stay in their home, first thing we did was to talk with the veterinarian, with the city and the county, and work them into the program. Seniors don't want to leave their homes because of their pets, and it's a defiance more than anything else. So what they need is some help, and we go in and we have a resource that goes in and talks to them about what do you want to do with your animals? We can take care of them. Do you want to go to a place that has animals? Do you want to just, if you can't take care of them, can we help? And I have to tell you that we've got a lot of resources going into a lot of donations for pet food and for help with animals. So we do take care of the animals. I mean, they're part of our living.
I know there are a number of programs, Life Care Alliance, Meals on Wheels, they deliver things, but there are assisted livings, independent, skilled nursing that accept pets, so it's just a matter of understanding which ones do. I think one of the emerging biggest challenges is if there is a need to shelter, individuals not wanting to leave home because they aren't sure if the shelters take pets. So that's a question that we've been sort of discussing lately, is understanding which, should there be a large-scale emergency, which shelters can I bring my pets to?
Do you want to encourage, if there's anyone in the audience that wants to go to the microphone and ask a question or provide a comment? Or Marisa would happily get some exercise and walk around the room and provide it. While we pass that along, I will share one suggestion. With the high prices increasing, can we get an additional recording fee designated to aging in place assistance? Maybe a separate trust fund for within Franklin County. So that's the kind of feedback we're looking for to evaluate. So I appreciate that suggestion. And if the microphone's on, we'll let you ask.
Hi, my name's Arthur Hill, and I live in the neighborhood. And I'm in the mortgage business, and I take calls from seniors every day throughout the country. I mean, this is not just a local problem, it's a national problem, where they say they can't make their mortgage payments because of high taxes, high insurance as well. Couple of things you might want to consider. I mean, we have Uber, we have Lyft. I mean, why not add a surcharge that'll help provide some tax relief for some of the people in the community? I mean, they come in, they do business in our communities, but, you know, are they giving anything back? That would help pay for some of the services that the seniors need. Number two, what's the age on being a senior? I mean, I work for a company where people in their 50s are getting laid off almost daily. So, I mean, we have to look at where, you know, what's the age for a senior? You talked about the tax relief or tax abatement. I think you have to be 65 to even, the homestead exemption. You have to be 65. I mean, we have to look at maybe lowering that, as well as the income that you have to qualify for some of the programs. Some of the programs, if you make more than $20,000, you can't qualify for some of the programs. So we have to look at the overall, some of the programs, as well as adjust not only the income level, but the age, as well as I mean, we're going to have to tax some of these businesses to help support the seniors in the community as well. So that's what I wanted to add. If, you know, like I said, I take calls from seniors every day, and they're in a desperate situation. I mean, they're like, I mean, how do you expect me to stay in my home when my taxes have increased? So that's all I wanted to add to it as well. And I'm quite sure you guys were aware of a lot of these concerns, so I would hope the next time we have a meeting, we come with some concrete solutions and answers. I'm not a big meeting kind of person. I mean, we can meet every day, every month, but if we don't come to these meetings with answers and solutions for the people, we're just really wasting our time.
I appreciate
Yeah, sure.
all the comments, but I mean, this was meant to kind of be the beginning of a larger discussion to get to concrete solutions. No? Absolutely. Okay. As the microphone moves, I'll provide another one of the comments. The resources money that comes into the Near East Side always goes south of Main Street. Why not north of Main? If I need work done on my home but can never get the funds, why not? I don't know if the commissioner wants to touch that. I don't think there's any intentional north or south of Main. I do think the money goes, in my experience, where the projects or where the opportunity is, a little bit who got in line first.
Well, actually, where the development happens on the Near East Side and south of Main is a part of that. It depends upon where the developers go. And many of you know that there has been an awful lot of new development north of Main, okay, as well as south of Main. So, but we don't have any control over that, to where developers select a property or not. For example, many of you may know that the Fairwood Commons Senior Living is now open, which is on Main Street, and they are pet friendly. Yes. So it kind of depends on where developers find properties that they'd like to develop. That's where we are.
Let me add to that also, that the Fairwood Commons it was asked to to work with that project. And I did sign a letter in support of it, but I said to them clearly that they needed to work with the community in order for me to do that. So what they have done is also they're collaborating and working with over at Bethany Baptist Church, Gertrude Woods, developers. And so they have a relationship with the community, not only just in terms of housing our seniors, and as I understand it, it will be a quality facility, but also in the construction of that facility and making sure that folks are being employed from the community also in the building of that. They're looking at other construction in the community and working with the commission around that. So it's important when developers come in that you do insist that there is a relationship with the community to help to, both in terms of revitalization and the employment as developers are coming into the community.
Question?
And I'm a young senior, and I am self-made, but I wanted to share what I'm dealing with. I moved, we don't want to say the word regentification. Okay, you don't want to stay away from that. But I am in an area on the south side of Columbus that has senior housing, and I moved into the new housing development, the NRP homes, one of the 41 homes that just got built a few years ago, about 6 years ago. But I want to say what I'm personally experiencing as a senior. The rising cost of the incoming community as they continue to build. My 32-page lease contract, and I will be able to purchase it in 15 years. My 32-page lease contract, still, there's a clause speaking about cost of living increase. So as the properties come in, as there's revitalization, I have had I've been there going on 6 years. I've had my rent increased, affordable housing, 6 times. So if I'm there for another 5 years and the revitalization continues, as a senior, I'm beating the pavement right now to find additional income. I receive a pension, but I'm looking for work, even though I'm experiencing some ageism. Okay, but still, the issue is the cost even of the tax-abated homes, the cost is increasing. So I'm paying market maybe 40% than when I moved in. And that's justified because of the area, the revitalization, the new properties. So then what do seniors do? If you're getting a pension, and some people are on fixed income, Social Security, and things like that. So if you moved into that, and then the costs keep rising, then where do seniors go that you can afford? Where can you go? And if you're no longer able physically, mentally, to work, then where does that senior person go? Where do we go? If the cost is increasing every year, and your income isn't necessarily, if you're on a fixed income, if you're on a pension, your money is not increasing. But if that is the consensus for what is being built, still you're forcing seniors to no options. Shared living, what are our options?
I didn't know, Patty, if when you got the mic, you wanted to.
Yeah.
I think it's something
Well,
Patty hears a
you-
lot.
You make an incredibly valid point, and the options aren't good. That's just the reality. We're getting calls from renters in market rate apartment buildings that have been purchased, and then they just don't renew the leases on the seniors in that building and they throw a little money into fixing up the building and they raise the rents, but they don't even want to renew the leases for the seniors. And this was affordable, and now it's not. And what happens to that senior sometimes is their car or the shelter, because they're right now with the waiting lists for senior housing or publicly funded housing where rent is set at 30% of income. You know, we have 1 to 4 year waits in many of these properties. And so we can't, you know, there's nothing we can do quickly to help that person get into housing again. You know, getting on a waiting list isn't really going to help in the short run. And this is most definitely a crisis situation here, and I think it's a crisis that the general public isn't really aware of, to be truthful. And it is people who have never been homeless in their lives. You know, I think the general view of people who are homeless is that, you know, this is someone who's chronically homeless, and you know, there are other reasons that they're on the street. Well, the reality is, no, this could be your neighbor now. This could be your grandma. This is where we're at, and we don't have good answers for this. If it's a situation that we think we can prevent an eviction, we will go to like community mediation services or legal aid. We do our best to try to prevent these situations wherever we can. You know, if it's a situation where it's a homeowner and they're in trouble on their mortgage, we direct people to Homes on the Hill or Homeport for foreclosure prevention counseling. At least maybe we can preserve their credit, even if we can't save the house. So these are some of the interventions that we will do in various situations depending on what's happening. Yes.
Old Town East. Old Oaks is a historical, Old Town East is historical. But with the elevation of historical districts, you have the elevation in property values. With property values comes an exceedingly amount of taxation. My sister lives in my mother's house. I know for a fact Old Oaks, what's going on in Old Oaks. And nobody wants to talk about gentrification. Everybody avoids it. It's like a red herring. But black folks deal with it every day. I get people actually calling code enforcement. I can actually document. I've kept them as almost like a catalog. And I actually know who's doing the calling. It's kind of sad that in a community, you got a split. Black folks are experiencing conflict in a community because of your neighbors doing the calling. Do you realize the code enforcement is $1,000 a day on code? Did you know that? That you can actually be cited and the citation is $1,000 a day? And if you don't comply, that's $30,000 a month times 12 months. That's the law. Did you know that's the law? That's your law that you put in that they know.
It might have been put in when Fran was on council, but yes,
Exactly.
I've inherited it, yes.
No, seriously.
Or Representative
The code says
Lieutenant Wayne
that
was.
you can actually be cited $1,000 a day for noncompliance. An environmental court says it is the role of environmental court to enforce code. Old Oaks, Old Town East. Now, there was an actual documentary written about Old Town East called Flag Wars. That's a fact. I mean, just look at the documentary. This is a model of national model right here in this community that's going on. And in the last 30 years, it's at peak now, that they're actually forcing people out of community because of your guidelines, and you're doing nothing to address it. That's a fact.
Well, I think part of why we're here is to help address that. So I don't want to say we're doing nothing, and I think it's something in my time, in 2 years, 9 months, 25 days on council, we're hearing it, and we're trying to get it addressed. And I think the more it's brought to council members' directly attention, as I mentioned, we need to hear that more. If it's just going to 311 and it's a code and back and forth with code, we're not seeing people come down to council. I try and make myself, as you know, very accessible, and it's just starting to be something that we're hearing more about with leadership like Commissioner Boykin, but always part of what this goal was in conversation. So I really appreciate you raising that. I don't know if Cole's going to pass the microphone around, but while we do that, I'll read one other question. Our schools have an F rating. Families who can afford to move out do so. Tax abatements are part of the problem. What incentives can be provided to aid affordable housing? Seniors should not have to remain in poor, high-crime areas. Any solutions for seniors must address the needs of the entire neighborhood. Seniors' quality of life is better when it is multi-generational environment with adequate social outlets. Isolation is not conducive to good health. I don't know if Katie wants to talk about that multi-generational piece.
Sure. So I'll start with isolation, right? So when you think about changing neighborhoods and what we hear is going on, very serious situations that are crisis-oriented, the calls that Patty is receiving, and we know that it's coming from both sides, right? So if an individual does want to leave, there aren't great options. If an individual does want to stay, there aren't great options. So if everyone around you leaves and you're the only person left, then your support network is gone, right? And so isolation can be a huge factor in thinking about, should I stay or should I go? Can I stay or can I go? In terms of multi-generation neighborhoods, there are some neighborhood-based strengths that haven't been brought up. We're in one, right? Central Community House. The settlement houses in Columbus are really important in looking at all ages and all contributions and sort of building and guarding that network of neighbors helping neighbors instead of neighbors trying to push other neighbors out. In our survey, we heard that about 20% of older adults live with their children or grandchildren, and that will just continue to rise, as Representative mentioned. As grandparents are taking on these important roles of raising their grandchildren due to some the opioid crisis and some other reasons, we need to value that, and we need to make sure that we're putting supports in place. And to your point, we don't have the answers yet, right? And we're trying to listen, and we're trying to hear from leaders in the community that, especially on the east side, that we've heard from. But it's happening everywhere, and we're a little late, right? It's in our face, and it's a crisis. But I don't have great answers either way, but I do think that multi-generational neighborhoods and supporting individuals of all ages is something that we need to really be attentive to.
And then very quickly on the incentive piece, council's heard you, and we recently changed the way we do our tax abatement incentives in the city of Columbus. And so depending on the neighborhood, we've created 3 tiers in our older neighborhoods to incentivize that affordable housing piece. Under the leadership of Councilwoman Page and Councilwoman Elizabeth Brown, they really managed that process. Is it perfect? We'll see. We haven't seen a project come forward that hits some of those triggers, but as the community continues to adjust to that change, that is going to have an impact in our ability to see affordable housing across all our neighborhoods in the city of Columbus. Yes, Representative, and then Cole's going to give 2 more questions. Yep.
Let me also add, and I'm particularly happy that that question was raised, because it really gets down to the question of poverty. Whether you're young or whether you're old, particularly our seniors are struggling. But, where employment has gone up, but wages have stayed stagnant. And a lot of people are working more hours, more productivity, but their wages have not gone up. And so therefore, there are a lot of folks in this community and other communities that are working multiple jobs just to provide for their families. And so, we want young people, we want intergenerational, from my view, in communities, but it's trying to find a way, and it is a delicate balance always, to make sure that all families can have quality of life. But this whole question about poverty is a real one, and we have a wonderful city. Very proud of many things that we're doing, but this issue around poverty is very serious, and one in which we've got to look at and make sure that all families know, and they ask about the children, no matter where your children are, no matter what your zip code is. that all of our children have access to quality education, period. And so, you know, we won't have all the answers here. That's why I think it's so important to hear from you as we're trying to develop policy.
Is Lisa Allison, and I work with seniors that are having mental wellness challenges. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Patty was saying, is that I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of seniors that are growing older that have never been homeless before, that are getting in this situation where they can't afford to stay or they're being pushed out, and the worry of where they go. And I know of seniors that feel much safer sleeping on the streets than going to a shelter, because they've never done that, and it's not comfortable for them, and they're scared. And the risk that puts them at for being targeted, for violence, for everything, but they continue to sleep on the streets because they may not have the local support of family. So I just wanted to bring that up again, that is going to be, I think, an ongoing, growing problem, and then that will also increase with mental health challenges. So it's something to definitely not lose sight of.
Please, Patty.
Yeah,
And then
to,
we'll have one more question and want to be respectful every time. But go ahead, Patty.
The other issue with that is what we are seeing is that folks that are going to the shelter or needing to go to the shelter actually are being turned away if they really are not able to do their activities of daily living, like bathing, dressing, mobility, that sort of thing. We're looking for a way to try to catch these folks, and if they're interested, willing, divert them maybe to a care facility at least, because the shelter is certainly no place for them. And this is a very serious problem as well. We're seeing a lot of discharges from hospitals and nursing facilities to the shelter. Again, I was doing some outreach in the shelters a couple of years ago, or for a couple of years, and to some extent they're set up for individuals who have a disabling condition, but they really are not set up to provide care. I was definitely seeing some people coming into the shelters with some very critical physical health needs, who maybe could manage their activities of daily living, but they were in there with PICC lines, wound vacs, and recently had just had very critical surgery. And so we've got some very, very vulnerable people on the streets.
And our last question.
Well, my name is Marty Grace, and I live on the south side, and I'm also a commissioner over there. And a lot of the issues that's been discussed here today is the same thing we're dealing with on the south side. I've been called several times about selling my home. I don't know why they think I'm going to sell, but I've been fixing it up. But it's a real issue. At one point, I owed the city $10,000 for loaning me money to fix up my home at one point. I paid them back 2 years ago, I think it is. But that's hard when you have to come up with large amounts of money, because I had to pay them back $10,000. And it wasn't that I had to pay it back at that time, but I felt that if I didn't pay it back when I could, it could come to a point where I needed their services again, and I still owed them all this money. So I paid it back, but there's other people in my community who needs that help. But it's getting harder to meet the qualifications for these loans or grants or whatever is being offered. And I think that the same thing with the code. I'm a commissioner and I was called on. I came home and there's this slip in my door saying that I had to, 7 days or 2 weeks or something like that to comply, or I got my little payment schedule or whatever you call it. But I contacted code enforcement, let them know that I was disabled, but I would get it done. And the work that they wanted me to do was created by the community dumping behind my fence. But I was told I had to clean it up because it was on my property. So I got my son and we went out there and we bundled up the stuff and got it done. But that's a simple solution for me. Other things, people are being told they got to fix this and that, and it's way more expensive than just picking up some branches and stuff that people have dumped on your property. And that is another real big issue on the south side, is illegal dumping. So,
I think that's a great place. We got a lot of work ahead of us, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to set the table for this conversation. Neighborhood stabilization, making sure we're working to keep seniors and address the code issues, costs for enforcement, and just generally everything that's been shared today. Really appreciate you taking the time to engage in this important conversation. Also want to thank our panelists, Representative Craig, Commissioner Boykin, Katie, Fran, Patty. Katie's writing something on me. I want to thank CTV, our hosts at Central Community House, as well as members of the City Council team, Cole, Kevin, Matt, Aaron, Stanley, Michelle, and Joellen. Again, appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. We want you to remain engaged. As I mentioned, hold weekly community hours. We'll be at a Tim Hortons on Dublin Granville Road from noon to 1:30. Just like Commissioner Boykin just came, I don't come with an agenda, and it was an opportunity to begin this conversation. And that's what led us to here and where we're going to set the next steps from. And so hope you continue to engage in my office, my colleagues, and the leadership that was today. You can always call my office, 614-645-8084, or email me, mstinziano@columbus.gov, if you have additional feedback. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but really appreciate you taking the time. This feedback today has been immensely helpful, and we will follow up with both the statistics and suggestions for next steps. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great day.